The following is a presentation of Foosball Radio.
If it's too loud, you're too old.
We could not believe it. We just went, oh!
I was a good bar player.
Okay.
I was very vocal.
Very vocal.
I wanted to win.
This is Todd Lafredo. You're listening to Foosball Radio.
It's FoosTalk Live.
You talking to me?
Compelling and lively banter.
Are you going to talk to us?
Talking foosball.
Foosball was how I measured my value as a man. You took that away.
Players and fans, promoters and pros. Unedited and raw.
Talk.
Living in the moment.
We have a lot of important things to talk about.
All while practicing social distancing.
Cool. We'll talk. No big whoop.
Let's get this thing started. FoosTalk Live. Coming to you live from the Foosball Radio Studios, it's another episode of FoosTalk Live. Hey there, I'm Tom Robinson, and I want to personally thank our Patreon pillars for their support of Foosball Radio and FoosTalk Live. Here's to James Sparky Castillo, David Kalla, Jay Teal, Brian Schmid, Cameron Burrows, Mike Green, Jimmy Love, Dwayne Stewart, Judy Schober, Jamie Kunst, Rob Cutler, Reed Rector, Clay Toomey, Adam Gilson, and our friends from the 716 Buffalo Foosball Club. Thank you. Your support brings continued and expanding content from Foosball Radio and FoosTalk Live as we cover the greatest sport on earth. Visit patreon.com/foosballradio to find out how you can become a Foosball Radio patron. Learn about the exclusive benefits we offer you. FoosTalk Live is brought to you by Original Leonhardt. The Leonhardt Tournament Model is the most popular foosball table at the ITSF World Cup. Designed and handcrafted in Germany, order online and have it delivered to your door. Visit www.original-leonhardt-usa.com and use promo code FoosTalk to save 10% off your purchase price. Yep, it's episode 142 of FoosTalk Live. And wow, it seems like forever and a day since we had all of these faces together. Of course, that includes the face of the greatest play-by-play announcer of all time, which would be Jim Stevens. Welcome, Jim, and welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a while, hasn't it? A lot has happened since we were last on the air. Of course, for tonight, we're into the top 10 all-time greatest singles players on the American Tour. But New Year's, Christmas, all the various things that have happened over the last 4 weeks. And here we are beginning what should be another great foosball year here at FoosTalk Live.
2023, is that even possible? I mean, wow. If you told me this 10 years ago, I probably would have had no response. But hey, I wasn't even involved in foosball then, but I digress. So, by the way, rowing practice is now being held in his backyard in Ventura, California. That would be Adam Gilson. Hello, Adam.
Hey there, everybody. Good to see you all. Mark, it's always good to see you come straight from practice at Little League. It's nice of you to be joining us.
A fantasy team. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm excited for tonight. I'm excited for this 10 through 6. I'm excited to talk to my buddies. I'm excited to be sitting in my bedroom again at the end of my bed, staring at a laptop. So life is cyclical.
High and dry. Good to see you. Good to see you, Adam. Incidentally, guys, I just want to let you know that the figures just came out tonight. It seems that Mark Torres now holds the record for the largest bar tab ever at the Holiday Inn in Clearwater, Florida.
Oh my God, did that really come through?
Yeah, man.
Where'd you get that from?
Oh, well, I surmised.
It was gnarly, dude. My wife couldn't have been happy. Holy smokes. It was a good time. Yeah, Thunderdome 2. So first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I was looking at my phone because I was posting, getting people to come watch us. But Thunderdome, just for a hot minute, Thunderdome 2 was a ridiculous success.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. It was tighter this time than the first time. And the first time was very, very tight. And there was some brilliant foosball being played by people I've never heard of. Jim, Rick Pomeroy, you would have been proud. You know Rick Pomeroy, right? I
do, yeah.
Where would you rate his push kick next to yours? Honest to God, honest.
Oh, that's a good question. It's not a shot I've seen in a long time from Rick. And at this stage of the game, I would probably put his, within the maybe 100 or so of mine.
So, I'll be real. I want to truncate this and summarize it because I want to get to the show. But it was an awesome event. It was really, really fun. Evan's great. Love Evan. He outplayed everybody. World balanced, of course, won again. But seeing someone like Wayne Welsh, who is a career solid expert, high level, but he has a master 5 bar. I mean, he torches these guys in Florida. And then seeing Rick Pomeroy come from Ohio and take it to Evan. Evan did not lose a singles match the entire time. He'd won 11 in a row, didn't go match ball, and to see a push kick with a push shot from the 2 bar beat Evan easily. It was win by 2 to infinity. He beat him 10-8. You might have heard the story by now. Evan looked up at 9-8, looked up at Rick Pomeroy into the camera and said, "If you don't pass and score this, you're going to lose." And Rick didn't execute the pass, but he got on the 2 bar and split Evan's zone with the push shot to beat him 10-8. It was really fun to see Evan. It was fun to see a push kick and a brush pass beat a 2 to the 5 in a rollover, and that was really entertaining. And there's we did the Thunderdomes kind of as pilots and really gracious to those experts, amateurs, and rookies to build up to what I've been trying to build up to now for 2 years, which is a master event called the Ironman Invitational. And that is being organized as we speak. So we're not certain about a couple things. We have sponsors. I have sponsors for that event. We have a location for that event. We have a ton of masters. I've personally spoken to a ton of masters. They're committed to playing it. We just got to make sure we got the right date for it. And that's in the works. And so that's my whole shtick. Thanks for letting me just take over, Tom, for like a month.
Always good to have the right date for these things. I can't imagine what's holding you up as far as announcing a date. But I'm sure, you'll continue to work on it, make sure that date is correct. But it does sound exciting. Like you said, Mark, we've seen 2 of these Thunderdomes now. It's sort of been a sort of a beta test of what this format could look like. And of course, you have a long history with this format. But to think about the top players in the world, and I know that even some European players would probably come over for this one, international players, to think about that kind of format played at that level, that competitive for that kind of money, certainly is exciting. And as a longtime Fooscaster, I would certainly love to be there to commentate that event.
Jim, it wouldn't be right without you. So let's try to get this thing right. Thank you.
Put it together, Mark. Come on. What are you waiting for? Let's get this thing on the road,
No.
Make it happen. Make it happen, dude. No, it's when I was watching the coverage of the Thunderdome last week, I did hear a few comments made on air about, well, where's the pro event? When's that happening?
Yeah. Some masters showed up to needle me about it. They came to the tournament to needle me about it. And so, it's a long time coming. And I think we have all the details together. I think the software is correct. I think the format is wired in, so we're ready.
Now, there's a commentation about a few things online. I know with Facebook comments and this kind of thing. I think it might have been, Tony Sprademan, who was just made a comment or two about the fact that Evan McGregor made more money in the last year winning.
Well, so what Tony said was that Evan made more in 2 tournaments than Tony did in several tournaments, and
Wow.
But I think, and look, there's another master, I won't name him. I spoke to him today, and I needed to make sure it was articulated that we made mistakes in the first 2 Thunderdomes, mistakes that the masters would have crucified me for if we made those in the Ironman Invitational. We won't make those mistakes. And so I'm very grateful to the experts, amateurs, and rookies that have helped make this thing right. And it's ready now for prime time with the top players in the world.
Mark, I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but you still are spooky to me sometimes. The way you do that. Anyways, yeah, I'm excited to
that
watch
thing
it.
he does.
That thing he does.
I know what you're talking about, Adam.
You know what I mean,
the
right?
Thing he does.
That thing he does.
Well, no. What fill me in? What is this thing?
No, it's this thing, dude. It's just this thing. Adam, we heard Tom mention earlier that you were getting rowing practice in your backyard. For those of you who don't know, California has been inundated with feet of rain. And we're also getting the results of that here in Durango, Colorado, where a lot of those rainstorms head our way, turning turn into snow. We've had 1.5 feet just today.
Wow.
But Adam, how did you weather that? Were you influenced by it, affected by it in any sort of fashion?
Oh yeah, it was bad. The first one happened when we were going to do the Wednesday night episode, and there was evacuation orders and rolling power outs going on. And then starting the next Monday, our backyard was flooded. We have an old house; it's not a leveled ground, and it was going in under the house, like huge going in under the house. So I had to dig an 80-foot trench from the back of our house all the way to the back of the property where there was an actual gradient. And that sucked.
Dude, that's crazy.
It was and it was so that went on, and I'm glad I did, because for the next 12 or 14 hours, it was almost spilling over to go back under in our house. And our house is built on 2 concrete sleds, and so it's just like sinkhole status. Like, it's not good. It's not good to have water under there ever. But it's a 100-year-old house. So yeah, we got by. There was a lot of accidents, all kinds of stuff. About a block down the street. Well, Jim, you know where I live. There's a river there, the Ventura River, and a bunch of the folks down there got stranded in there, and they had to do this massive rescue operation. It was everybody in Southern California, when it rains, they lose their mind. It just, they can't drive. It's scary. So we got by though. And I think we're gonna have. Here's the thing. We survived the floods, whatever. In about a year from now, when it's this time and all the vegetation comes up, and if we get another dry spell and there's the fires or everything, we could repeat of the scary flash floods and mudslides that happened after the last time we got this much rain, which led to the Thomas Fire, and then led to Montecito just basically getting destroyed.
Yeah.
In 2018. Wow. So it's it is what it is. Man.
It's California, it's and of course, as someone who used to live there, you deal with all of this. You deal with earthquakes, you deal with these heavy rains in really only January. You deal with brush fires, with mudslides, etc. But you also deal with the best weather in the world and one of the best, certainly qualities of life anywhere in the world as well. So, glad to hear you swum your way through it.
I did.
Swam your way through it, and you're okay, Adam.
I did.
Well, guys, the reason we're back together again here on the 15th of January is to pick up where we left off. What was it, 2 years ago? As we were.
It feels like it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Finishing up the list, this time 6 through 10 of the top 25 male singles players on the U.S. Tour. We will get to that, of course, tonight. I don't want to spoil the party or ruin the mood, but I do want to share a message we got earlier this evening from our Foosball family, I should say. It seems that Hall of Famer Shane Kruger, Ted Kruger's father, has passed away unexpectedly about a week ago. And the Foosball family has come together for Ted and his family by canceling all the leagues and holding benefits throughout the state. And between the 3 different events, they were able to raise over $2,000 to help the family with funeral expenses. Nice. That's amazing.
Yeah, that Shane Kruger, a Wisconsin State Hall of Famer, I believe. His son Teddy, the childhood friend of Tony Spredeman up there in Wisconsin. In fact, they played together as teenagers in many events, and Teddy remains an outstanding player and had a chance to cover he and his dad playing together at the Colorado State Championships a few years ago. It seemed like a really, really good dude, and we know that Teddy certainly is. So condolences to the entire Kruger family.
Right. Yeah, we're very sorry to hear. Very sorry, but of course it is a family, and again, our best to Shane Kruger's family and friends, and of course all the Foosers that have respected.
Yeah, and on that topic as well, there was the passing of a recent international Hall of Famer, a guy that came to the United States many times. In fact, one of the first European players really to ever come over and play on Tornado. Hans-Friedrich Kircher, the man who is credited with inventing the snake shot, known as the jet in Europe. The jet is what they call the snake shot in Europe. And his nickname was the Jet. And he was a guy that came over, always had a smile on his face, always played the game the right way, had a crushing handshake. I remember, each time he would, Jim, good to see you. And he spoke very little German or English. But he would shake my hand and ow, he would just crush it. He was a stonemason or something. But a man, certainly one of the legendary figures in the history of European table soccer, passed away a couple of weeks ago. So also condolences to him and his family, and an unforgettable guy. And those of you and he was probably at the Tornado Worlds 10 or 12 different years. A guy that if you met him, you'd never forget him, and really enjoyed him, except when he shook your hand.
Right. Wow.
I'll just mention that Brett Nguyen shared with us how the Wisconsin community came together for Shane Kruger, and it was a really heartwarming story of the Foosers coming together and holding this benefit and surprising the Kruger family with this donation that is very generous and supportive and mostly heartfelt for the legacy that Shane left behind. So of course our sentiments there. And I want to add about Jet that it was at the World Cup we had all these people in the chat. We had Terry Moore, Frederic Collignon, we had Rich Lopez from Northern California, we had Greg Grant. Somehow we had all these guys that were the first proprietors of the rollover in the United States. I mean, the early people shooting the rollover. Rich Lopez started shooting the rollover in '88 in Fremont, California, and that's like real early. But that's not apparently that was like he was already a recipient of it from Southern California. It was migrated through, and by and large, there's a little bit of debate, but not much when you get to the German community and these early pioneers of it. They all point to Jet. And if we were to do like a most influential Foosers of all time list, Jim Stevens would be there somewhere. Fareed would be there somewhere, and Jet would be there somewhere, just because of the impact on foosball. So, our condolences and sentiments to the great Jet Hans, who really was we want to call him the pioneer for the rollover.
Yeah, certainly one of them in this country. I think we generally credit John Smith with being the first one to really use it out on tour in the early '80s, and actually used it in 1991 when he won the singles world championship. Didn't use it primarily; it was still a pull shot, his primary shot. Yeah, but Jet, a memorable character, and certainly we're all saddened by his loss.
And our condolences, of course, to the German community when it comes to foosball, and what a great family you have there. Incidentally, I understand that the Germans are some of the best beer drinkers on the planet.
Very nicely done,
What
sir.
Jim and I like to do right about this time is to reveal our favorite IPA.
Jim, it's been so long, but you know what? That gave us more time to do our research when it comes to coming up with our latest, greatest IPA.
And we've been doing plenty of research, that's for sure. This tonight, Tom, I think I talked about it last time we were on the air, is that I've been kind of migrating towards a lot of the New England hazy IPAs. They really invented the hazy, and they do it extremely well. This week, I'm going up to Portland, Maine, a little bit northeast of where you are, Tom, but not too much.
Yeah, a little bit.
For the Lone Pine Brewing Company out of Portland, Maine. This is the OJ Double IPA. It says here, fresh squeezed American hops packed into a pure citrus juice box, 0% fruit, fresh, never frozen, not from concentrate. OJ, there it is, the OJ Double IPA.
Oh, I love that.
You can see beautiful color. Look at that. The
You already
richness of color.
Is it
okay.
8%?
It's 8.1%. Yes, 8.1% a double IPA, and absolutely delicious. New England comes through again. How about you guys?
Adam?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? I feel like my sound. Okay, good. I just before I open this up, which is a nice Lagunitas Maximus Colossal IPA. When we're talking about people we'd lost recently, I also want to just shout out to, of course, Bo Guidry passed away a couple weeks ago. And I just wanted to say our thoughts are with everybody down in Louisiana area and south that were good friends with him. I didn't know him very well, but he always had a smile on his face and always good energy. So he will be missed. This Maximus Colossal IPA. My wife actually picked this out for me. She said, "Hey, I know you like these things, so let's try it." I don't know anything about this.
IPAs, for goodness sake.
You're gonna like it. It's good.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, that's quite good. That's actually really light and mild for. I thought it was going to be like one of those heavy doubles, because it says colossal, but no, this is absolutely excellent.
That's a tall can too.
It's a tall can.
Nice tall can. Nothing like a tall drink to get you through, right? Well, Jim, you and I are thinking alike tonight. I mean, you went to Lone Pine, and so did I.
No kidding.
Yeah, same place. This one is a little bit different. This one is one of their milkshake style IPAs.
Look at that. We landed at the same brewery, Tom. Wow.
Go here. And we had nothing to. We didn't say anything to either one of us. So Cloud Cake is a milkshake style IPA. This is only my second ever. but it's a soft and sweet IPA brewed with all the familiar hops and malt that you've come to love from a hazy IPA. When in doubt, drink dessert first. Okay, I think I'll do that. Hold on. All right, nice popping sound. Let's see how she pours. Well, a little bit of lactose going on there. A little bit. Let's see what the flavor's like here.
Is that what it's called? Lactose?
Lactose.
A little lactose in that one. It's a milkshake.
Are you sure?
Oh, that ain't no baby's milk, I'll tell you that. That's great.
I learn a new word every time I come on the show.
Oh, come on now.
Mark, what flavor LaCroix are you drinking tonight?
We need to know.
You know what? You said it. You started the show with it. I can't afford to drink an IPA after I go to a foosball tournament. I don't know, Tom, if you were making it up. My bar tab at that Thunderdome was ridiculous. So it's decaffeinated coffee.
Do I not know you well enough, Mark? Is that the case? Come on.
You know me great. You know me perfect.
Why do you drink decaf coffee? That's like a sugarless.
Dude, do we need to go here? Do you know how I'm a glutton? I used to drink 9 cups of coffee a day from Starbucks. It was like a $200 a day habit.
Wow.
And I was super addicted to caffeine.
This company or what? I mean,
just like I'd drive around from surgery center to hospital, and there's a Starbucks. I just grab a venti iced mocha, whatever, and I just guzzle it. And so I was so addicted to coffee. Like that's enough about me. Enough about me, guys.
We just can't help ourselves.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Hey guys, it's an exciting night, Tom. It is. We're into the top 10, and this is when we get into some very, very familiar names. Literally the best of the best. When we get down to this is when we're talking about the true legends, the greatest players to ever play the game, and in this case, the greatest singles players. Well, we probably should review what we've done so far, but it's kind of interesting to see who isn't in the top 10 and to see who is in the top 10. And we're going to alert all of you to that here coming up.
Yeah, I know. So, looking forward to that. Incidentally, it's been so long since we got together. I did pull out a special flashback from way back when.
With great moments in foosball history, this is a FoosTalk Live flashback.
But it's match point for this man right here, Johnny Horton. He's used both of his timeouts. If he scores right here, he's in the finals. Johnny Horton from pole shot position, strokes it long. Johnny Horton, who last won a world title back in 1990, has advanced to the Open Singles Final, and boy, is he happy.
Oh, he really is. He's really here for the crowd. He knows he's in the big show now. That match was won by Johnny at the beginning. Tracy was unable to execute shots very crisp or very well. Once Tracy did get on his shot and started hitting the ball really good, Johnny just simply denied him the ball. Wouldn't let him have the ball anymore.
So the World Championship's well underway. We've got our first finalist. Johnny Horton has reached the Open Singles Final. We've got lots of open doubles, open singles, a little bit of mixed doubles and women's doubles action well down the line as the World Championships 2001 continue after this.
Listen in next time for another great moment in foosball history. It's FoosTalk Live.
Adam, Mark, that is classic Jim Stevens. Classic Jim Stevens. That is that's the way it was.
Classic Johnny Horton. You could hear Johnny walking away talking crap after he won, like walking away from the microphone.
Yeah.
And that's the year that Johnny beat Robbie, correct, Jim?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
2001.
In the silver shirt, and then jumped up on the table, and everybody sort of surrounded him. Very memorable performance, certainly. And from a guy that really, coming into that event, was not one of the pre-tournament favorites. So you got to remember, Frederick Collignon was there, and had won the last 2 world championships in singles. You had Terry Moore really in his prime. You had all these great singles players, many of whom we're going to talk about tonight. But it was Horton, who had also had some issues with staying out on tour, because he would have a great year and then he would get kicked off tour for a year. Then he'd come back and have a pretty good year, and then get kicked off tour for 2 years, right? And so he was kind of coming back, and nobody really expected him to be there, much less eventually win it over Rob Maris, one of the 6, I think, finals that Maris got to on Tornado at the World Championships. But certainly one of the most memorable events, period. 2001 Tornado Championships. My wife brought this out earlier. This is a foosball from the 2001 Tornado World Championships right there.
Yeah.
Wow. Great doubles final that year as well. Maybe the greatest match ever played. My wife was at that event, right? I've told this story before. My wife was at the 2001 Tornado Championships. There's a picture of her playing on table 36 or whatever. And in the background there, you see the inside Foos booth, and I'm sitting there commentating. We would not meet for another 7 years, but there she was, literally 50 feet away. Who knew that we would end up meeting and have this, beautiful little family and all of that. But certainly one of the most memorable events in history for me personally, and I think for the sport in general.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, what a memorable moment. Of course, by the way, guys, while you were gone, we did a quick episode of FoosTalk Live featuring some excerpts from an interview that Mark and Mike Green conducted with the great Johnny Horton. And we got a chance we listened to a few excerpts from that long interview. That episode, by the way, has more than doubled the amount of downloads for any episode we've released of late as a podcast. It's been, I think it's over 340 now in just a space of a few weeks, which is unheard of for us. So terrific. And thanks again, Mark, for providing that interview. And of course, you and Mike Green did a nice job talking to Johnny. I just wanted to ask you about that. How did that happen? What was going on before and after the interview?
It's so odd. It was so impromptu. I wish the audio was better, and you've had to deal with that audio, and I'm sorry you've had to deal with that audio. You had to do a lot of work with that audio.
Sure.
Johnny Horton, not unlike Lafredo, and not unlike some other foosers, are like real recluses in their own. There's this duplicity or duality, rather. Like Johnny's got this abrasive, crazy personality when he's in his character, and then behind the scenes, severe anxiety and not completely reclusive and introverted. And so Mike Green, who is as good a friend as Johnny Horton has ever had, was able to get on a totally impromptu call. You want to talk to Johnny? Now's your chance. I'm like, hell yeah, let's talk to Johnny. And I said, Johnny, get permission. Can I record this? Absolutely, you can record it. I put him on speakerphone, put on record. That's why the audio is so crappy. And I'm just like, I want to get as much as I can. And I don't know if you have maybe you have the full length of it. Hopefully you have the entire. You hear Johnny start referring to stuff like he refers to a under 17 match with Thor Donovan that he beat Thor in. And it's like, how the hell? And you have to so Johnny has an eidetic photographic memory when it comes to foosball and his history. And he really, when you listen to him, Tom, he's a brilliant. He's a flipping genius. He's a complete genius.
And it reminds me of his Hall of Fame acceptance speech in Las Vegas a few years ago, when he literally started from day one of his career and went year by year. We had to cut him off right around 2000 or so, but because it was too long. But literally, the detail was phenomenal, and I would have loved to have listened to him for another hour. Unfortunately, we have schedules and such with those ceremonies, but. He really does. As Mark said, it's an eidetic memory that every little detail, and you find this with the great players in any sport, don't you? I mean, Clayton Kershaw could tell you a pitch he threw to a guy 15 years ago on 2-2 in the 7th inning. And it's that kind of attention to detail, I think, that contributes to these guys being the elite of players in any sport. So, and for Johnny, and we know Johnny's had some health issues. It's really great to get him on the record. And great job, Mark and Mike Green as well, to be able to capture a little bit of his memories, of Johnny's memories. And it does not surprise me at all that it would be the biggest and most popular episode ever. He's such a magnetic figure, such a polarizing figure to some degree, which is what kind of makes him magnetic. But it would be great to do that under a different setting where we could actually sit down, have a conversation with good audio. But to be able to do this, Mark, great job. Super job.
Now I know that Mike Green has said that since that interview, Johnny has been in and out of good health and is not doing so well. So the sooner the better. Obviously, if we get a chance to actually have arrange a formal setting, but nonetheless, we still have the full interview yet to come. We only played a few snippets of it so far, and so part one was just an introduction, and then of course, as time goes on, we're going to first release the entire unedited interview to our Patreons to start with.
Awesome.
Shortly thereafter, it will come out to the general public, the general listening audience. But lots of great material there. Good stuff.
I will tell you that the interview, that part of it that was heard, some master from the 70s, a prominent one, called me. And these interviews, the history is polarizing, right? The history is polarizing, not unlike our top 10 list will be polarizing because people's filters and memory and emotional connection to the memory. And so it's fun. It makes for great entertainment, great discussion. And once we get in our list, I will tell you that this part of the list, a master I spoke to today, a world champion master who's following this show very closely, told us who was in our top 10. He named them all. I didn't confirm. He named who the top 10 were, and he was adamant that certain people should be in a certain place, which I can assure you we're not in that place. So
what can you say, right?
Yeah, right.
And as we begin to sink our teeth into this tonight, it's kind of interesting. One of the things I kind of landed on was, as I put together sort of these bios that we're going to read tonight, was the comparison of where they were on the top 50 all-around players, greatest players, and where they are on the top 25 singles. And it's kind of interesting to see how some of the players, like 3 of the players tonight, were not in the top 10 as far as best players, but are in the top 10 as far as best singles players. And that's kind of interesting. And again, this is the same 4 voters in both, right? And so it's through these same filters in which we think are strong ones. But it's interesting to see that we really isolated some of these players down as being extra great singles players. So, and that I found that fascinating. I found that really, really telling and really interesting.
So, Adam, before we dive into this last, well, is it the top 10 now? But this is the last top, let's say 6 to 10. What say you about this list tonight?
A couple things. First off, I just want to thank everybody in Twitch land joining us tonight. We're going to read your comments, whatever you're saying, except for Florida Man Rules. I always just kind of cover my eyes when he posts, but that's okay. But anyways, appreciate y'all. I'm just kidding, Florida Man. You know.
Are you? We love you. We love you.
Am I? No. So let's see. What are we talking? Oh, I should say this. I've gotten hundreds of letters and emails. I've gotten some just, people have left bags of flaming poo-poo on my front porch ever since I torpedoed Lafredo's chance of being in the top 10. Just lots of hate mail, unfortunately. But you know what? I can live with that. It's
because, understandable.
Yeah. But I can live with that because I still firmly believe that when we talk about the top 10, and Jim, you already touched on it, we're talking not just good players and not talking, I think, personally, records. This is where I think I deviate from the rest of you, except for Gummison. I think it's iconic. You think singles especially, right? Jim, I think, and we've talked about this again a lot, singles matches are the funnest to commentate on. Oh my gosh, it's like a whole nother level. And if you think about the iconic status or nature, the legendary status or nature of singles players that elevate the game to that, you think top 10, right? For me, Lafredo, maybe 11 based on his record, maybe 12. He ended up 13, I think. But I can't think, and this is the fun of this list. This is the fun of this conversation. We're going to go through these 6 or these 5 and then another 5 next week and be like, could you have moved one up or down one? Could you have traded any one of these when we think of iconic nature status with Lafredo or anybody else in the 11 through 20 spot? It's a fascinating conversation. I'm glad we're having it. I'm looking forward to it.
It is, and that's part of it, certainly the iconic status. And you don't think of Lafredo as being a great singles player, although as we went over the numbers last month, certainly he deserves, I think, maybe a higher placement than we ended up at. But, some of the things, and again, this list equally as difficult as that top 50 was, were any of these players considered the best singles player in the world at any time in their careers? I think maybe, and we're going to see this part of it play out. The eye test, right? Watching a guy. There are players in our top 10 one in particular who maybe only had about 7 major championship titles. But the eye test suggests this is an incredibly dynamic singles player, unlike we've ever seen before. The other things, of course, we've got to consider that the strength of an era. When you look at players from the 70s, that's going to give it a little bit of a different texture than maybe other eras would. Although longevity also can be key. You have the concentration of the 70s. You have the longevity of players who started maybe in the early 90s or even in the 80s and have continued through today. I think, Tom, probably a good idea here in a minute is for us to kind of go 25 through 11. I'll kind of review who we have talked about so far. Mark, did you have anything else to say coming into this?
Well, just in brief, that I was recently reviewing ESPN's top 10 all-time basketball players, and I have a guilty pleasure that I'll admit to. I joined a NBA legendary debate group. I don't even watch the NBA anymore. I don't even like pro basketball anymore. But because I'm kind of a troll, I joined a group called NBA Legendary Debate Group. And it's basically says NBA Legendary Debate Group, we hate LeBron James. And I spent a lot of time in there taking a crap on LeBron James. And I don't feel as strongly as I pretend to, but I do feel strongly that anyone that's calling LeBron James the greatest basketball player of all time doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. And so I get on there and I troll these guys. It's fun. But back to this ESPN top 10, it has Michael Jordan at number 1, LeBron James at number 2, which I think is ridiculous. It's absurd. It has Kareem at number 3, Bill Russell at number 4, Magic Johnson at number 5, and I think it has Wilt at number 6. And I'm like, how the hell is LeBron James?
I agree with all of that, by the way. And I'm a big basketball fan.
Well, I don't. So let me get this in context why it matters in this discussion about foosball. Depending on the filter, a lot of the younger guys who grew up in Terry Moore's era, and this is circling the drain because we talked about this during the top 50. If you grew up in Terry Moore's era, you think Terry's the best thing that ever happened. If you grew up in Tony's era, you have no point of reference. But if you have a larger scope, a historical scope, you'll realize that you can take era in context and add another layer to it. Are you an alpha assassin? Are you an assassin on the foosball table? That matters. If you're a killer and you have a killer instinct, that matters. And unless you have that perspective, you will make these filtered biases and put people where they shouldn't go. So anyway, that matters in this conversation too. We're going to get into the top 10, and these top 10 players may or may not have more or less wins or high finishes, but they're all killers.
That's a great point. Yeah. And I'd love to debate you about LeBron being number 2, by the way, because I think I have plenty of facts to support it. But that's for another situation. But Tom, should we review 25 through 11?
You put LeBron ahead of Magic Johnson?
Magic Johnson to me is the greatest player in the history of basketball.
Okay,
but I've had to come around. I've had to come around to using numbers, using science, etc. In the general consensus is it's Michael Jordan. To me, Magic Johnson's the greatest player I ever saw. And so, for me, Magic is my favorite athlete of all time. So that might color it a little bit. And I also met him at the grocery store one time when his rookie year.
You're seeing the problem in real time right now.
Absolutely, it is. Hey, Tom, should I go ahead and count down 25 to 11 before we go into it?
Let's review what we have so far to this point.
All right, number 25, and we can actually go a little bit beyond that. There were 3 players who did receive points but did not reach the top 25. Number 28, Brandon Moreland. Number 27, Adrian Zamora. And number 26, Brandon Munoz. And again, I think with Munoz, it's a lot of that is the eye test, right? Our top 25, though. Number 25, the great player out of Oklahoma, Kevin Keeter. 24, Ronnie Nevoy, who has appeared on both of our lists and yet is not a Hall of Famer. Think about that. Number 23, Dave Gummison, who was a contributor to this list, which may mean he's maybe a little lower than maybe he should be, although Dave didn't play a lot of singles. Number 22, Greg Jeep Perry. I think he's a little bit low on this list. What a great singles player he was. John Smith, one of the great players, certainly of the 1980s, and then doubled at the World Championships in the early 1990s. Don Swan, another eye test guy, never won a World Singles Championship, but you got to have him on this list. He pushed the envelope as far as singles play goes. Lewis Cartwright, who a great singles player in the mid to late 90s, who then kind of stopped playing singles and focused on doubles with great results. Number 18, the great Rick Martin, the rocket launcher out of Idaho, out of the Pacific Northwest. Number 17, Johnny Lott, who everyone feels is pretty much where he should be, except for him. And then number 16, Mike Bowers, truly one of the great pioneers, the first world champion of the major professional tour. Number 15, another guy right there with Mike, one of the pioneers, Steve Simon. Number 14, Robert Mares, in 6 finals at Tornado World Championships. Never won one, but has other singles championships. And if you've ever seen Robbie play, you know what a great singles player he is. Number 13, Todd Lafredo. In my opinion, at least 5 points, 5 positions too low here for Todd. But again, you don't think of him as a singles player. Another guy that actually a lot of people think might be a little low, and Doug Furry at number 12. But I think when you look over the record of Furry, as a singles player in particular, I think he landed in a pretty good spot. Number 11, Tom Spear. No one will ever forget the performance in 1994. What a great singles player he was, certainly. And that's where we land now at number 11. And we're going to head into the top 10 here in just a minute.
Are you guys ready for that, by the way? Are you ready to do that?
Yeah, and I'm really excited. So just before we start, I want everybody to know that's in the comments that's having opinions. We may or may not get into it that much this episode and the next episode, but we're going to have the post-mortem episode after the last one and talk about everything. And when people say Mares is too low, we have to have that conversation. And I think that I've talked to a lot of masters as well that have been asking me about where Mares was before this whole started, and it's an interesting thing to ask right straight out at the bat, like, where should that be? So, anyways, that's just something to think about going forward. Keep saying stuff in the comments, in the chats. We might not get to it right now, but we will definitely do that in the episode after the last one.
The post-mortem, yes.
Tommy Atkinson wants to participate in that post-mortem so we could tear us apart, and I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Yeah. Well, we welcome him to the show anytime, for any reason, and of course, especially that.
Yeah.
So, if you guys are prepared, I'm prepared on this end. Let's do this thing.
Throughout the history of professional foosball competition, the top players have waged war. Many have tried, and many have failed. Last year, we presented the top 50 foosball players in the history of the game. Now, FoosTalk Live returns to bring you the names of those who stand above the rest. The top 25 singles foosball players on the U.S. Tour. This list has been compiled by experts, stored for weeks in the Mark Torres Enchilada Pantry, locked in the vault of the firm Stevens, Torres, Gilson, and Gummison, and hand-delivered under armed guard to the studios of FoosTalk Live. Tonight, we present to you the top 25 male singles players of the U.S. Tour, ranked from number 10 through number 6. Here now is the number 10 ranked male singles foosball player on the U.S. Tour, Steve Murray.
Mark, when you mentioned, you talked about killers, you talked about assassins on the table, and I think that certainly applies here. This is certainly one of the greatest competitors the sport has ever seen. Out of the state of Texas, inducted into the National Hall of Fame in 2002, Steve Old Dad Murray was the first player to ever triple at a world championship event back in 1987, and was simply one of the greatest pure singles players you're ever going to see. Steve won a total of 7 major singles titles during his illustrious career, including world championships in 1987 and 1989. He was also second in 1985 and 1986, giving him 4 world finals in 5 years from 1985 through 1989. That is impressive. And people don't always realize that, don't remember that necessarily unless you were there, unless you were a fan of the game during the late 80s. But that was a very, very competitive period. That was the early part of the second golden era when Steve was in 4 of the 5. A 2-time U.S. Open singles champion, also won a national singles title in 1992, which was his last major singles win. And this is a guy that, because of circumstances, was sort of forced to retire a little bit earlier than he wanted to. I mean, again, one of the great competitors. Steve wanted to go on. He wanted to keep competing at the highest level, but that takes a sacrifice. It takes time. And because of his position in the sport at the time, because of his job, he was sort of encouraged strongly to sort of not continue playing at the highest level. But simply one of the toughest, most competitive players to ever play the game. Number 18 on our list of top 50. Number 10 here, again, illustrating what we think of him as a singles player. The great Steve Murray.
Me?
You.
So for the Kickstarter, we did a Kickstarter for Inside Foos, and I asked a couple of masters if they wanted to donate some stuff. And I asked Steve for some jackets, and he said, I mean, how many do you need? And he had, you could do an Oklahoma Championship, 87, or a Halloween Open, or this Texas Championship, the first Masters Championship green jacket, which he donated, and Jerry Todd bid on. He is a flippin' assassin. That guy was an assassin. If you watch that guy play singles, and so like if we had to call a perfect singles player, a perfect singles competitor, someone like Fred or Tony. Let's imagine those are our two. Those guys win for different reasons. And Tony and well, let's start. Fred is like, who knows what I don't know what the super variables are. You know, it starts at a young age and it has all the tools and supportive family. Who knows what all the variables are that create a complete monster like Fred. But the monster that created Steve is a different type of monster. Steve had a unbridled fury. And I don't know if it was some misdirected anger or what it was, but there was some emotional inferno that Steve carried with him into singles matches. And he obliterated people with sheer fury. And I'm talking about it was manifested in a lot of ways, and it was psychotic, but it was so charismatic and so I would just follow that guy around to watch him play singles. And he this is a true story. I think I told this story on the show one time before. One of the first times I met Steve Murray, it was in Santa Barbara I think it might have been the U.S. Open. I don't know if what it was called in like 1990.
San Bernardino, yeah.
San Bernardino, that's it, San Bernardino. And I was playing the piano, okay, because there was a piano in the hallway. And Steve came up and he said, man, he was so sweet. He said, that's beautiful. Man, I really, how long you been playing this? Really sweet. And then he starts playing a match against my buddy Fernando. And I say one thing about Fernando. I said, take your time and hack at it, Fern. And Steve looked up. He was like within 5 minutes of me playing the piano for Steve. He looked up at me like he wanted to rip my throat out and murder me. And that's what kind of champion Steve Murray was. So Steve Murray, man, such an incredible competitor. I think his dedication and commitment to the growth of foosball, to Jim's point earlier, limited his competitive opportunity. And we're not giving him any extra points. Steve given the opportunity to play the next 10 years in singles would have had an obscene number of titles and might have killed Federico if he had the chance to kill Federico in a singles match. Love Steve Murray, one of my favorite all-time players. And now we're going to get facts from the great Adam Gilson.
Well, actually, what we're going to get is actually Santa Barbara sending you mail saying, why would you confuse us with San Bernardino? But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that's insulting to Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
What a great place that would have been for a tournament.
I know, that's
Adam?
exactly
Santa
what I was
Barbara?
thinking. I was like, wow,
Beautiful.
down there in State Street. All right, Steve Murray. Let me just continue with this theme of iconic. Here's a deep cut, and I'm sorry, but I have to go here because this is who I am. It's what I do. Iron Chef is one of my favorite cooking competition shows. I love it.
Oh, really?
I love it. It's originated in Japan. Kitchen Stadium, all this.
Who will reign supreme?
Who will reign supreme, right? It's competition. It's people that are at the peak of their game, and it's what they do, and it's how they do it well, right? And when they win, they're passionate. They love it. The things that they do sometimes might be looked on as incorrect or wrong or poor form. But when Bobby Flay came in and beat the champions, Iron Chef, and won about 15 years ago or so, he iconically leapt on the prep table with his arms over his head, and everyone's like, what's that guy doing? What's he care, right? But that sticks on my head, and I always thought that was Steve Murray. I didn't realize that was Bobby Flay, but it was also Steve Murray iconically leaping on the table, the foosball table, and doing the same thing. I think there's two kinds of iconic, and I think we're going to be talking about this as each person gets counted down. I think the iconic that we see in play style and ability is one thing, and there's iconic in personality. And when those two things come together, we get a Steve Murray. And it was my great pleasure to get to know him in the last year and a half since I came back from foosball. And I can see that. I can see it. Even the Fire playing pickup games at Bordeaux the year before last, Jim, when the first time I really actually met him, and all I could see when I saw him and I realized and I put two and two together was him leaping up on that table, that famous picture of him, and the fire, as you said, Mark, and the ability that he has. Number 10, Steve Murray.
The Bobby Flay of foosball. I love that. That's or maybe Bobby Flay is the Steve Murray of chefs. But there's certainly can see the analogy there. No question about it.
Beat Bobby Flay, please. How many shows do we need about this guy? Jeez, enough already with the Flay. All right, well, let's get back to this countdown.
Coming in at number 9 on the FoosTalk Live Top 25 Singles Foosball Players on the U.S. Tour, Tommy Atkinson.
Oh, I can hear Steve Murray now saying, "You put Atkinson ahead of me."
Yeah.
Tommy was one of Steve's proteges. Steve was a guy very influential early on in the career of Tommy Atkinson. But you look at the numbers, and again, the eye test. If you watch Tommy Atkinson play singles, you say that is a great singles player. Certainly one of the most entertaining players ever. A tremendous singles player. Burst onto the scene, of course, in a big way when he almost tripled at the 1993 World Championships in Dallas. Won his first world championship in open singles, defeating Terry Moore, by the way, the defending champion, and really considered the best player on tour already by then. He won a second world championship, defeating Scotty Weidman in 1997, becoming the first player of the 90s to win two. And again, that decade, you remember, 8 different players won singles championships during the 1990s. Only 2 players won 2 world championships that decade. Tommy Atkinson was one of them. And again, that may have been the toughest decade ever for singles competition. When you look at the names of the players who won, the names of the players who could have won each and every event. His 4 world titles during the 1990s, 2 open singles and 2 open doubles, are third most behind Lafredo and Moore. So that kind of gives you an idea of where Tommy was during that decade of the 1990s. Atkinson also won back-to-back national titles in 1997 in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Yes, there was a national championship in Oshkosh. I was there. And then in 1998 in Canton, Ohio, the home of the NFL, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So he wins back-to-back in 1997 and 1998. A total of 5 major singles titles during that second golden era. A true showman on the table and a guy who really has become a total class act off the table. He remains, to this day, one of the game's biggest stars. He finished number 11 on the list of top 50, number 9 here. One of the great players ever, certainly in singles at number 9, out of Oklahoma, inducted in 2016 into the National Hall of Fame, Tommy Atkinson. I wonder where he thinks he should be.
It's funny. I don't know. Tommy could feasibly argue that Murray should be above him. It'll be interesting because Tommy adores Steve Murray. Yeah. And Tommy, to your point earlier, Steve Murray he's a protege. But Tommy, you mentioned the major championships. It's not unlike Steve Murray. He has more regional and state titles than we couldn't even count them. He probably has no clue.
Mm-hmm.
He's listening. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So we're from the same era. We were, he was probably a novice and I was an amateur, and then he won the world championship when I was still a novice. So he was way ahead of me in the growth curve, like miles ahead of me in the growth curve of skill set. But one thing specifically that stands out about Tommy is every era gets a nemesis. And every great champion gets a nemesis, and his nemesis was actually Todd Lafredo. And he made it a point that he was going to dominate Todd Lafredo, and he dominated Todd Lafredo. He made it a point that Lafredo would tell you that there was a whole time period where Tommy Atkinson was going to shoot his pull shot, and he was going to go straight or long. He was going to torque the rod and go straight. And they looked exactly the same, and it was a dead bar long and a straight that were identical, and he just destroyed people. And the split was basically a blind split. His 5-bar was totally trippy. Not unlike Murray, there was so much determination and so much intensity that some players were more talented, maybe if you want to call it that. They were maybe more skilled. But he was one of the hardest working dudes. He was going to Starbucks, which is a billiards hall. He would practice there for hours and hours and hours. He'd dominate the pool and he'd dominate the foosball tournament. And he just sat there all day long, getting better and better at his game. And eventually, he did the traveling with Terry Moore, and eventually he became an unstoppable force. And there was absolutely a time when Tommy was the best singles player in the world. And I don't know what that time range was because he was fighting with Terry Moore, but these were back and forth, engaging battles. Tommy Atkinson, I'm just going to be exciting to hear where he thinks he should be on this list, but it should be no less than where he is. And wow, not enough to say about Tommy Atkinson. Just amazing.
Too much to say, in fact. And I'll say just two things. And I mentioned this in the top 50 when we did the top 50 last year, 2 years ago. I think Tommy Atkinson was the first child star of Foosball in that we watched his growth and development, Jim, through Inside Foos, starting back in the early 90s, right? And we saw up and down to see the path that he took and the path that he struck. And we talk about iconic, his game style, his game play, that presence that he has. And I know he's going to hear this. And I know he knows this about the energy that he has on the table, but off the table. This is what I'm going to talk about. Off the table. We talk about iconic. I've only been back in Foosball again for like a year and a half or so. And I won't get into any specifics or anything, but behind the scenes, I know the kind of man that Tommy Atkinson is. And I know how much he cares and loves Foosball and the people that play it. And I know, based on that alone, he would be number one. We're talking about record, life, and all that. That changes things. He's at number 9. But my goodness, we are all so fortunate to have a Tommy Atkinson in Foosball. 100%. Number 9, Tommy Atkinson.
Yeah, no question about it. And, we talked about the fact that he won, I believe, 5 major singles titles, majors, but then again, dozens of state and regional championships. But again, sometimes that almost doesn't matter. Yes, you got to win to kind of get in the top 10, no question about it. But it's the way you go about that winning, I think, oftentimes that that really ends you up in positions like this. And I have a question on here from the Twitch audience. Where does the nickname Two Guns come from? I actually gave that to him. I actually gave that to him back in the early mid 1990s when I was writing on a regular basis. I would write all the tournament reports for the Table Talk magazine, and we always had to come up with headlines, for these players in order to kind of make them sexy, right? And what kind of goes along with Tommy. And I thought, Two Gun Tommy, he's sort of a gunslinger, right? He's out there. At that time, the ball never stopped when Tommy played, whether it was singles, whether it was doubles, that ball was constantly moving. He would get it. No one has ever played a high speed game better than him. You talk about Brandon Munoz these days and maybe a couple of other guys who can do that. But Tommy was the guy who had the most success early on without stopping the ball. And so I called him that. There's a headline, I think, with Two Gun Tommy, and also on the foosball cards of 1995 that we created as well. But certainly that is a nickname that definitely fits this gentleman's style of play. And by gentleman, I certainly mean gentleman, because this is not only, like you say, Adam, great player on the table, but a guy who really, really cares off the table and is a very, very good friend to foosball.
No matter where there's a foosball tournament being held, if Tommy's not in it, he's watching it.
Yeah.
He's always watching it.
Somewhere.
Next.
Now, for the player coming in at number 8 on the FoosTalk Live Top 25 Singles Foosball Players on the U.S. Tour, Tony Bacon.
Here's a guy, and we talked about it early on about where 50 and where they land here. And I'm not sure everybody really realizes, our committee did, that Tony Bacon, a great doubles player, great forward, but he was an even better singles player. One of the greatest forwards of the Dynamo era and a very savvy singles player who was also excellent on Tornado. He was a Dynamo champion multiple times and kind of segued and evolved into the Tornado style of play. Started on TS as a teenager. I first met Tony, I think, when he was 15 or 16 years old. And was a rising young star on the TS Tour. He was competing for titles in the Pro Division, and then the tour crashes in 1981. And this was a guy that was out on tour. He was out touring. He was out driving event to event. He was competing at the pro level, hoping to become one of the game's biggest stars. And then, of course, the rug gets pulled out from underneath him as the tour crashes. Tony won his first major singles title at the 1983 U.S. Open on Dynamo. and won a total of 6 major singles championships on the 1980s Dynamo Tour, including 3 Dynamo World titles in a row in 1985, 1986, and 1987. And say what you will about the Dynamo Tour, you still had a few really good tournament soccer players. You had some tornado crossover players. You had this group of Dynamo players who were sort of a post TS style. The style remained pretty much the same with a few differences, but that tour was tough, as any major tour is going to be. He would also win open singles at the 1989 National Championships, which was his only major singles title on Tornado. Still able to translate to Tornado and win a major title. Part of I think the decision making on this list comes from looking at a player and asking, was he one of the 2 or 3 best in the world at any time during his career? And the answer for Tony Bacon is certainly yes. Number 19 on our list of top 50 players, number 8 here, the biggest jump of any player, out of the state of Michigan, inducting into the National Hall of Fame in 2014 in one of the greatest induction speeches ever, acceptance speeches ever. Hilarious speech. If you ever have a chance to watch it, it is, I believe, at Inside Foos. The great player out of Michigan, Tony Bacon.
Some of these guys have a mystique about them that follow them around, even though we never. So I started playing in 88, 89, and I don't have a foosball table. And I go to this scrawny ass Filipino kid that's going to my arcade. And for some reason, the foosball table's down. And this kid invites me to his house. It's James Castillo. And he lives behind the arcade. And he has a Dynamo foosball table in his garage. And he's doing a topside 5-bar brush series on Dynamo, 2's 3-bar. And he's doing 2 to the 5, 5 to the 3 brush series. And he had never seen Tony Bacon play. He'd only heard. And he'd seen someone else copy Tony Bacon at the local tournament. So he is basically a student of Tony Bacon without ever having met the man. And so James Castillo is like showing me foosball. I don't know what the hell is going. He's destroying me at foosball. And Tony Bacon's game is alive in San Jose, California, because James Castillo saw someone else who was idolized Tony. That's the impact these guys have on foosball. That I'm learning about Tony Bacon's game. And so when I finally get out to...
He got really excited there.
He did.
I think he's feeling it.
This is the world we live in these days, right? But you can, and Mark's right. Mark is completely right about that. No question about it.
No, he absolutely is. And I'll just start talking while we wait for Mark to come back. Hopefully, I have to keep pulling this out. Like, first off, when we talk about iconic, we talk about that, and Mark just talked about it. That 2 to the 5. It's amazing. Bacon was winning on that in the 80s. It was on a Dynamo. It was the Dynamo was, I think, much more precise. There was more precision, of course, in the tournament soccer before that would allow for that kind of thing. But everything that I know about tournament soccer, about that style in the 70s in singles, was not that kind of transition game. And yet Tony Bacon was doing it. Iconic. But just to move to this, because I love pulling this thing out every time I get a chance. It's Table Soccer Digest from 1986. There's this great section here where the top players at the time rank everybody. I hear Mark coming. We got the Dynamo top players, the tournament soccer top players, pulled by the top players. And top 5 singles players on the Dynamo, and this was 1986. Number 2, Horton. Lafredo was 3. Stachlik was 4. Tom Spear was 5. And they all voted for number 1, Tony Bacon. Top 5 best defensive 5 rows, Tony Bacon, number 1. Top 5 best pull shots, Tony Bacon, number 1. Top 5 most intimidating players, Tony Bacon, number 1. And that's the thing that I hear most about Tony Bacon when I talk to anybody doing my research about that. And we talk about this. We talk about presence on the table. And we talk about, can you get into somebody's head before they're even at the table? If they're thinking about you, if your reputation precedes you, we know Sprademan's like that. We know Rico's like that. All these top players are like that. Bacon was like that. Tony Bacon at this place on this list is very well deserved. I don't know if Mark's coming back. Maybe we'll come back to him in a little bit. But Jim?
You don't need to come back to me, guys. My computer crashed. I think I was just going to summarize by some of these guys' reputations precede them, and Tony is one of these legendary foosers and lived up to the hype big time. So thanks for picking up for me, Adam. I have nothing more about Tony.
Yeah, Tony was a fighter, no question about it. I think he was a former boxer, not the biggest guy around. Probably, went about 120 pounds soaking wet there during the most of his career. But this was a guy that when you played him on the table, or even before, as you said, Adam, when you saw him, you kind of knew you were going to play him. You knew you were in for a battle. This guy was a fighter. And also, one final point about Tony Bacon, probably still the biggest, most popular episode we've ever had on FoosTalk Live.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Good point. I was going to say he's already in our Hall of Fame, and we have no Hall of Fame, but he's already there.
Number one.
Well, let's continue.
Here's the player who's ranked at number 7 on the FoosTalk Live Top 25 Singles Foosball Players on the U.S. Tour, Dan Kaiser.
Yeah, we talk about the 1970s, the tournament soccer tour as being the golden era of football, and it really was a $1 million tour with these guys playing for a living and constantly trying to improve their game. The sport evolved at a rate that we haven't seen before or since. And with all of those great players on the TS tour of the late 70s and early 80s, he was the only male player to win 2 world championships in open singles. And that I think right there is a testament to his greatness. He claimed honors at the 1976 event and then again in 1979. And he also won super singles in 1979, which was a huge event focused entirely on singles. And he was also voted that year as the tour's top singles player. So he wins in 1979. He wins the world championships. He wins super singles after winning in 1976. In 1978, the year before that, he was the Tour Player of the Year when he reached 6 singles finals, more than anyone, and he won 4 of them. Just a tremendous singles player. When you look at, he's not going to ever be on our top 10 probably of greatest 3 rods or 5 rods. But as far as scrappy players, as pure singles players, he certainly deserves to be here at number 7. He was scrappy. He caught anything that came near him on any rod. He could score from everywhere. His peers, and you talk to the guys from the 70s, whether it's Dave Gummison, whether it's Ken Allwell, whether it's some of the other players from that era, they view him with a tremendous amount of respect. This was a guy they look at, and these are great Hall of Fame players, and they look at him with a bit of awe. He might even be a little low on this list, considering the level of competition that he had to go against during that golden era. Now, it's tough to move him ahead of any of the players that are remaining. But when you're talking about the best singles player from possibly the strongest time in the history of the sport, the golden era, this is where you land, and that's on Dan Kaiser. Inducted into the National Hall of Fame back in 1998, and he showed up in Las Vegas, made a beautiful speech, finished 9th on the list of the top 50 greatest players, number 7 here on the list of greatest singles players out of Portland, Oregon, the great Dan Kaiser.
I'm going to defer the majority of my time to Adam Gilson. I will just say that I had a chance to talk to Ken Allwell about Dan Kaiser, and you said it, Jim. They think that Dan Kaiser had a magnet hidden in his min because he was so scrappy. He would pick up every loose ball, and he'd grind you out. He'd outthink you. He was not, admittedly, on his own volition. He wasn't the fastest guy. He wasn't the most talented guy, but he was working his ass off. He worked a ton on his game. He was very cerebral about the game, incredibly thoughtful. And we started this whole we started this show with alpha. Like, who are the assassins? Who are the closers? Who are the guys that figure out a way to win? Who are those guys who wire themselves and wire their brains to figure out a way to get it done unanimously? These guys that saw him play and experienced it, they just knew he was going to figure out a way. He was going to figure out a way to get it done. And so we talk. One theme we talk about over and over is guys with talent and skill and speed that could do anything at any time. They're around us right now. They're all over the place, and those don't end up being your winners. Your winners end up being these guys that work the hardest, that just will go down fighting to the very end, and that's how Dan Kaiser is remembered when he's remembered for his foosball skill. So anyway, that's what I got on Dan. Go ahead, Adam.
I want to thank you for deferring 30% of your time to me. So just to that point, though, Dan Kaiser showed up at Moneyball last year and sat in the booth with me for a match. It was some random match. It was whatever, he just was there in the mid-afternoon, right? And completely kind, very nice man that just was looking around at this tournament 30 years removed from the last time he stepped. No, he was at the Hall of Fame, right? But he has not really been involved or thinking about foosball outside of that in the last 30 years. And he sat in the booth and did color commentary on a match. And within 40 seconds, a minute, he had already seen what the changes were, the evolution of the game, was looking at what he would have done, how he would do things differently, what he was learning from it. It was like a ticker tape thing. Like, it was just all of a sudden just like information was coming out of it, right? But it wasn't flashy. It wasn't anything about who he was as like a defining thing of him. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like streamers or anything coming from the ceiling. It was just him just being methodical about stuff. And I would say, and there's going to be some tweaks in here, I would say he was Foosball's first Tony Sprademan, as far as somebody that tried their ass off because they knew it was for free to try your ass off. I'm not saying that they had the same ability or were changing things in that way, but I'm saying they had the same kind of mindset, and that's a mindset that wins. Dan Kaiser was the first. He said it during that match that we were watching. He was like, "Look, I wasn't the most talented guy, but I took what I had." And I tried, and I tried, and I tried, and I tried, and that's just what he did. And that was Dan. And it speaks to why he could. And this is the thing, and Jim, that's a really great point. Could he be higher? Could he, since he won what he did win during that time period, could he be higher? You could make that argument. It's very interesting as we go on. But he was the only one, I think, at that time frame that won 2 world championships in open singles, right, during the golden age. Yep. You don't do that because you just show up and, flip a coin and hope for the best. So you look at players like Dan Kaiser, and I think it should give the rest of us hope that don't have freakishly great talents and abilities, where we think, hey, if we just commit to it and show up and try, this is what we could potentially do. Maybe not Dan Kaiser level, but maybe something better than just winning the 1990 amateur doubles at Worlds. Jim.
You know what? If you're going to quote him correctly, he said, I tried, and I tried, and I tried, and I tried. I can't get no satisfaction.
All right, Jim. But he did get satisfaction twice during that decade. And we had him on the show, right? He was on the show. He was on the, we did an interview with him. He was fantastic. Right. And it's always interesting to hear the perspectives straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, from players like him. And again, it's also great that we are able to do something like this to focus in on the history of the sport. And remember, players who really put it all out on the table, worked extremely hard to become great, because that, like Mark said, there are a million talented guys who can shoot long shots and do them quickly and catch balls and do things. But there are only a few guys who are truly winners. And certainly Dan Kaiser was one of those.
So, Mark, you and I have to go into a debate on this one, but who made the best version of Satisfaction? Would that be the Rolling Stones, the original version, or would it be Devo?
Oh man, I have a lingering nostalgia for the Rolling Stones version.
Yeah. Devo is cool too. But anyway, so okay, so this is the 6th position on the list. Of course, we all know that. There's already been controversy that someone else should be in this particular position other than the one we're about to hear. So let's let this one fly and see how it falls.
Next, the player ranked at number 6 on the FoosTalk Live Top 25 Singles Foosball Players on the U.S. Tour, Terry Moore.
Yeah, I don't know that Terry Moore could possibly be lower than this. And to be in the top 5, top 6, knocking on the door of the top 5. I mean, this guy, he was the player of the 1990s, and there isn't any doubt about that. It really wasn't that close. He was simply the player of the 1990s. He won 8 major singles titles in the decade of the 1990s, including 2 world championships. He, along with Tommy Atkinson, the only 2 players to win 2 world titles in open singles during that very, very difficult decade when there were only 8 players who won. He also reached the 1993 and 1994 finals, lost to Tommy Atkinson in 93, and lost to Tom Spear in 94 after winning in 1992. So 3 straight worlds, 3 straight finals for Terry. won just one of the three, or else maybe we're talking about a guy who won three and probably would be higher on this list. Appeared in a total of 4 World Finals during that very difficult 1990 decade out of 10. 40% of the open singles finals during the 1990s involved Terry Moore. Of course, toured the country, as has been well documented in the movie Foosballers and on this show from the early 1990s on, and added dozens and dozens of state and regional titles. I'm not sure anybody, maybe outside of Tony Sprademan, has won more state and regional titles than Terry Moore. Unquestionably the best player in the world from 1992 to 1998, and a guy who was also an underrated goalie, a skill that certainly contributed to his success in singles. A very, very good defensive player. The other thing that he did really well, and you wouldn't think it. How big was Terry? Terry was about 6'5", 6'6", went 3 to 4 bills, right? A very big guy, but had an amazing transition game. Now, some of that was reaching, but Terry also a very good athlete for a man of his size. He isn't thought of being quick on his feet, but really, really good from a transition point of view. Had a great 3-row, obviously, one of the great 3 rows of all time. Had an awesome 5, incredibly consistent, just so consistent. Great goalie, great transition game, while also being one of the smartest players to ever play the game. Finished number 7 on our top 50, number 6 here, pretty close. A guy that I think we still look back on as absolutely one of the iconic players in the history of the game, Terry Moore, out of San Diego, California, inducted into the National Hall of Fame in 2008.
Terry Moore, we were rookies together, and he went off and did the things that there's a part of what he went and did when he went traveling around playing foosball against everybody, especially like in the Lafredo crew. And him and Lafredo had their own secret practice sessions, and there's all this exclusivity, but he was playing against all these guys, and they were playing every tournament, every regional, every state tournament. And there's a part, and I have my friends in California, Northern California, there was a part of us that wished that was something, the part of us that wanted to remain youthful about our world. Like at this point, Fernando is like working his ass off at like Ross Just for Less, and I'm going to college and like miserably, like just struggling through my undergrad classes, and these guys we're all going to school somewhere doing something, and Terry's out there, and we'll see Terry like 3 or 4 times a year because he comes to the NorCal State Championships and the SoCal State Championships. That's after he's coming back and driving all over the country. So part of his like spirit is going around the country playing foosball, and it's something we wish we could have done. And he turns that into incredible success. Like, we can get circular about it. We talk about Steve winning everything. We talk about Tommy winning everything. Terry was winning everything. Like Terry was winning every damn thing. I know that all 3 of these guys couldn't be winning everything, but they're pretty much splitting up first place all over the country. And it comes to a point where Todd is like he starts playing with Terry so he can get some wins here and there because it's Todd's livelihood. Todd makes his way at the big tour events. He's winning at the Worlds, but these regionals and state championships are being completely dominated by Terry, and then secondarily by like Tommy, and then at some point Todd's just trying to win a couple. So it's just a remarkable career. He's a massive dude. His 2-bar it's just crazy. His 2-bar, he would just destroy you scoring from his 2-bar. He would destroy. He'd get the ball from his 2-bar score. His game was so methodical. He's so tall and so heavy that his brush passes you couldn't stop his brush down. He just like squibbed the ball out. I don't know. I can go on forever and ever about how great that dude was. There are plenty of people that will argue Terry's too low on this list. They will argue until they're blue in the face that Terry's too low on this list. I mean, he may be too low on this list. It could easily be argued, but I don't know. Just Terry was at a dominating era that he owns all to himself.
Yeah. Terry Moore. Wow. There's a lot to say here. Let's stick to 2 things. First off, and there's a cyclical nature here. I mean, we talked about, and this is my knowledge, and perhaps I'm wrong, but I feel like this is right. I mean, we started the show paying our respects to Jet, right? The inventor of the rollover. But was it not Terry Moore that brought it into the limelight in American foosball? Was it not him that? And Mark, you have said this before. you and him were both rookies, and you both had meteoric careers, but in different directions. And
Screw you, Adam.
Yeah.
Whoa.
but I mean, my point is that it was not when he actually started shooting the rollover that changed that direction, that changed that vector for him, right? And when we talk about iconic, again, we talk about the things that change the face of anything that we're watching or caring about. In this case, foosball. It was him. It was him that he combined that. He's left-handed, no? I mean, he brought that amazing five bar of his and finally connected it to something on his three and with his right hand that he could score and do well. And you combine that with the cerebral nature that he has and his defensive capabilities, which I know firsthand. I played with him in a couple of ProMaster Pro draws or whatever it was in Vegas in the early 2000s, and learned terms and thoughts about foosball that I'd never even heard about, because that was a whole nother level that he was playing on. But one of the things that stands out to me most about him is every time I see him at tournaments in the last 10, 12, 13 years, he's like this shining light on the porch, and there's all these little mosquitoes kind of always like floating around him, right? And there are all these other masters and everybody that came up from in the early 2000s that will always say, this is their influence. This is their guy. Terry Moore is their guy that brought them, to who they are now. And as much as what you do on the table and what you can win and have on your mantle with your trophies, I feel like next to those trophies are all the trophies, all the people that he influenced decades later. There's a huge, huge importance to that. Terry Moore, the iconicness of him. Iconicness is a word, by the way. I just made it up. And let me just close out. I got to close out. I'll just my last thing, because I just saw Serge is in the chat group now. Hey, Serge. I remember a match in Vegas in the early, probably mid 2000s, and it was Serge and Terry playing singles. And I remember Serge doing the weirdest stuff, and I was like, what is he doing? This is so ridiculous. And Terry just stopped and he said, give me a break, Serge. Not like as a jerk. He's just like, give me a break. Like, just stop doing that. I need to get away. And I'm just thinking, God, most people that would do something like that, you would sound like they were complaining. You sound like they were being anything like that. But Terry was just like operating on that level that exceeds anything I think that most people around him work at. So Terry Moore, number 6, well deserved.
You said meteoric, and I don't think I've ever seen a player have such a meteoric rise in going north. I've told this story before. 1989, I'm at a tournament in Long Beach, California at Yankee Doodles, really, really awesome place they used to host. And I think this was a $2,500 tournament, and some of the players came up from San Diego, where Terry lived at the time. And on the Friday night DYP, I draw. I look and I see I've drawn this guy named Terry Moore, and I'm oh great. And he comes up to the table, and I'm like, because I've seen him play before, and I'm like, well, anyway, I wanted to get out of here a little early anyway. And I said, hop in the back, big guy, just do the best you can back there. And we were out like 3, and he was terrible. 3 years later, he's the best player in the world. Yeah. And it was like shocking. It's like, this guy that I drew, the big guy from San Diego. And then 3 years later, because he put in so much work, because he adopted this new style of shot, which, by the way, we first saw in Southern California in about 88, 89, a player who came out of New York named Gary Cacciatore, brought it in from the East Coast, out of New York. And that was the first time we saw it. And Gary spread it to other players, and eventually it got to Terry Moore, who then iconically turned it into not only the greatest shot in the world, the most popular shot in the world, but the shot that literally changed the game and made him number 6 on our list. Terry Moore, a meteoric, iconic, truly a guy that could be higher. And again, if he beats Spear, if he beats Tommy in either of those 2 finals in 93 or 94, he wins 3 world titles in that decade. He is certainly in the top 5. And again, it's that thing we talked about with Trevor Park. Those one balls, it comes down to one ball sometimes, one play, one event, where they could have been much higher on either the top 50 list or on this one, the top 25.
Is Gary Cacciatore any relation to Chicken? No, I will say this about the meteoric rise of. See, I get a laugh out of Tom. Okay. I just want to say that meteoric rise was so stupid I beat he would get the ball every time as a rookie because I beat him in rookie doubles, and then 2 years later he's the open singles world champion.
Yeah,
there's no rise like that.
No, there isn't any other. There's no other rise like that in the history of the sport. No.
Nope.
Jeez, wow. He must have learned something when he was playing you guys. Something.
He learned a rollover.
Wait, say that again. What was that? Say that again. What he went from what to what?
We played him in rookie doubles and amateur doubles in like '89, and then in '92 he's the open singles world champion.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. It's still to this day. I mean, we were shocked then, but even to this day, and a lot of that was because he hit the road and did what he had to do and worked hard at his game. But now we're down to our top 5, and for those of you out there watching, I'm guessing that for the most part you can guess who those names are. What the order is going to be may surprise you.
Yeah, this is getting endlessly fascinating, and I love hearing the stories and, of course, the history of these players. By the way, Adam, I think earns the award for metaphor of the night. Light bulb through other masters, the mosquitoes. Now, okay,
I might
Adam,
have said moth instead of mosquitoes. That's my only criticism, my only critique of that. Yeah.
all right.
Well, I know.
Adam, I got to ask you the question though. Who's the bug zapper? If he's the light bulb, who's the bug zapper?
That's Lafredo. Lafredo's running around, zapping all of these players coming around his boy Terry.
Wow, I cannot wait. This is it's only a week away. The final 5. Are you guys ready for the pressure though?
For sure. I mean, we've got some homework to do. We like to put together numbers, and when we're talking numbers, this is when it gets really interesting. When we compare the top 5 players to each other, what they did in the eras they did it, how important was the event, how many world titles, how many total titles, were they iconic, did they affect other players, do they pass the eye test? All of these things come into play as well. Now we talk about the 5 greatest singles players in the history of the American Tour.
And how many mosquitoes are floating around them?
Correct.
Especially if you're from Florida.
I would have said moss.
I know.
I think
you're in summer
mosquitoes.
camp. You're in the cabin.
Let's
you're
redo it.
You're killing all the moss.
Let's just start the whole thing over again, Tom.
Mosquitoes good. Mosquitoes good
is
because
good,
it connotes like this blood sucking. I don't know, like this leaching process that happens when masters
Spreading malaria. Yeah.
I mean, you could say that the snake shot, according to Johnny Horton, was the COVID of foosball. You'll hear that in the interview, by the way.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Very interesting.
I would blame. There's some other things that I might blame ahead of snake shot, and maybe that's something we can get into on a different.
That would be a
discussion.
whole other conversation.
Like, what do we really think?
Yeah.
Well, we're overdue for that, and so many other things like hot or not, and those kinds of things.
But we have this one. We have this one. We have the 5 through 1 next week, and the week after that, we're going to be our post potato more. What's the word?
Postmortem.
Postmortem
was perfect. Yeah.
And I think because we really just kind of talk about it, because I think as much as good as it is that this serves as a history lesson and a thing for people to learn these kind of things. It's this conversation that we're going to absolutely have to have and be like, hey, why do you think this, that, and the other thing? And I don't know, Mark, you're talking about like what I know you can't say what masters you have been talking to, but does any of them rhyme with like
ass kissing?
Ass kissing? No, I didn't say what you did to get the chat. No, I'm just.
I've been in touch with no less than 3 masters that are very engaged in this process. 3 specifically, and they're all over the place, and they're error bias, just it's all over the place. There's not agreement. We knew when we get to the top 10 it was going to be incendiary no matter what. We don't. The 4 of us agreed via consensus voting, but we didn't. Our top 10s were different. So if we had to argue about it, and we didn't really argue about it this time as much as just agree to disagree. But there are plenty of people who have strong feelings about this thing, and they're entitled to that. They're not right. No,
they're all wrong. They're all completely wrong. But it does offer tremendous conversation, and that's kind of what we're looking to stir up here. And I hope we're doing a good job of that.
Yeah, we are. We definitely are. When I get someone calling me twice in a row at like 9 a.m. on a Monday to talk about the Sunday show, and I'm like at work, like in an operating room, like, dude, I'll get back to you as soon as I can to talk to you about this.
Who has time at 9 a.m. on a Monday to call you?
Right.
Let me just figure that out.
Some insomniac someplace.
9 a.m.
Well, you're staying up all night. Can't wait for someone to be awake to talk about it.
Okay, Stoner Tom, what time do you wake up, dude?
Okay.
One of the other things, the way that we have separated, great players from great singles players, I think is a really important point. I think it's really because it's almost a whole different game, isn't it? And Adam said it earlier. There is nothing more fun than doing a great singles match. I think if I was to put together my top 10 most fun matches ever to commentate, at least 7 of them would have been singles, because I love to talk fast. I love to try to follow play, but also the level of intrigue, the level of strategy, the level of just pure approach to the game, which can border on genius and oftentimes surpass that border, makes the singles format really, to me, the purest form of foosball. It's a table designed for 4 players, right?
Yeah.
But the best way to play the game, the most entertaining way to play the game, the most interesting way is one-on-one. One guy being 2 people. And that's kind of
you can't take a break.
No.
Singles mentally breaks people down. Like Dave Gummison stopped playing singles because he couldn't commit the energy and mental endurance to it. Plenty of people will pay a package to a tour event that pays for whatever it is, 6 events, and they'll forsake singles. And there's a lot of reasons why. They don't feel like the durability or the mental stress or the anxiety, all these pieces come into play. So someone who focuses on being a great singles player has decided, they've resigned to, I'm going to be focused on this ball the entirety of the time I'm in a match, and the ups and downs are so high, the highs are highs and the lows are lows in the course of a ball. You got to have it. You're a special animal to love to play singles and to be a champion at singles. You're a special animal.
Yep.
Easy to hate singles. Easy to hate singles and easy to not play it.
Well, guys, I think that this next week is going to be, dynamic. Let's put it that way. So we're going to be back again, of course, next Sunday for FoosTalk Live with, of course, the last 5 of the top 25 top singles male players on the U.S. Tour. And whether you agree or not. And by the way, I got to say, we've had a lot of interesting conversation in the Twitch TV chat this evening. Thank you for joining us on Twitch TV.
Florida man is high as a kite. That's all I got to tell you. You can just take one look and tell he's high as a kite.
I think so.
But you know what? You got to love his enthusiasm. You got to love his love of the sport of foosball. That's quite evident. And I guess I got my final point, I guess, about tonight is, as we move into a new season, as we look forward to the Hall of Fame Classic and any events that Mark is promoting, and the Texas State Championships and all these other great events, I think this list is allowing us to maybe focus in a little more closely on singles. And I know that if you're watching at home for some of these events, Adam and I love talking singles. We love it. And when Mark's working with us, it's really fascinating to do a deep dive into what players are thinking when it comes to singles. And I would hope that during the course of this next year, that this list is allowing all of you foosball fans to maybe take an even closer look at what we think is the game's best format.
Mark, any closing comments or parting shots?
No, I'm looking forward to the fallout between 3 and 5 people probably after this. After this 5, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of conversation, and it's all fun. That was the point. The point is not to deliver something that is boring and not worth discussing, or people are going to ruminate on this stuff, and they're going to ponder it, and they're going to absorb it, and they're going to have their opinions. And I love that. That's kind of what we do. So no, thank you guys for doing this, and keep on inviting me back. And then one day if I don't get an invite, I'll know why. It's because I screwed the whole thing up.
That's when you're at your best, though, Mark, is when you're screwing things up. So no, we're going to continue to invite you. No question about it.
Yeah, I know. It's a balancing act with you, Mark. My parting, again, I want to echo what Jim is saying. Like, singles is an art form in foosball more than I think most people think about or realize, and it's really something to think about. It's really something to really try to dissect, because I do know a lot of people that just don't like singles, and for a reason. It's hard. It is hard. I mean, and you think about that. It's hard. You're showing up at these tournaments. You're paying money to go to these things, and yet, you bow out of certain events because it's hard, and which is totally legit, and it's fine. Know yourself and all that. But I think that you can still learn a lot from singles when you play it, even when you're terrible at it or suck at it or whatever. you still learn something from it when you try. You at least
Yes.
try. My last thing is that the top 5, I think, it just gets into this weird place where you start thinking about, obviously we had a list, we all had our vote, and it gets to this top 5. And there's a level of artistry that comes from trying to figure out people that are so close and yet so far in so many different categories in their career. How do you even try to quantify it? We shouldn't be doing this, but we're doing it. And that's the fun part, right? Like, that is the great part about this, is that we're putting to words something that should not really actually maybe be done, because in the long term, in the interest of foosball, these conversations is what drives growth and learning and understanding about the sport. And if we talk about, and this is what we're going to really get into, and I know we will definitely get into it, the difference between a 5 and a 4 and a 3 and a 2 and a 1 is going to come down to a nuance about the game of foosball that is just going to be, I hope for anybody listening, something that they can take away, bring with them in a little satchel to the next time they practice, and maybe get a little bit better. That's what I'm excited for.
That's profound. What a great way to finish this.
Profane.
It's profane. Well, guys, let's do this again next week. It's FoosTalk Live. Thank you so much for joining us on Twitch TV. We'll be back, and thanks again to all our Patreon supporters.
Foosball tournaments are everywhere. FoosTalk Live proudly presents a weekly update of events near you with the FoosTalk Live Tournament Beat. Time to make your plans with the 2023 Kentucky State Tour kickoff, February 1st through the 5th at the Clarion Hotel in Lexington, Kentucky. It's the next 518 Foosball Smashdown, Saturday, February 11th at Shots Billiards and Wicked Eatery, Route 9, Clifton Park, New York. The Moneyball Northwest Foosball Tournament happening February 16th through the 19th at the Hyatt Regency in Portland, Oregon. Don't miss the $5,000 DFW Championships of Foosball, February 17th through the 19th. Carrollton Chop Shop Sports Garage, Carrollton, Texas. Here comes the $12,000 Georgia State Championships, February 23rd through 26th at Embassy Suites in Atlanta, Georgia. The Wisconsin State Championships are being held March 16th through the 19th at Mad Apple Billiards, Appleton, Wisconsin. Don't miss the $10,000 Illinois State 10th Annual Foosball Championship, Poplar Creek Bowl, Higgins Road, Hoffman Estates, Illinois. Mark your calendar for the 2023 Hall of Fame Classic at the Golden Nugget in Las Vegas, Nevada, April 12th through the 16th. The Masters Open Championship, April 27th through the 30th at Holiday Inn, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Florida. And who could forget the Tornado Championships, August 30th through the 4th at the Clarion Hotel, Lexington, Kentucky. Each week, we do our best to give you the most up-to-date listing of foosball tournaments near you. If you have an event you would like to add, send us all the details at info@foosballradio.com. Tune in every week for the FoosTalk Live Foosball Tournament Beat. FoosTalk Live is a product of Foosball Radio. With gratitude, we recognize our Foosball Radio Patreons. Our FoosTalk Live sponsor, original-leonhardt-usa.com. And thanks to InsideFoos.com for use of their audio during the show. Tune in again next week for another episode of FoosTalk Live. In the meantime,
we'll see you foozin'.